I was halfway through the most important pitch of my life when the call came. Dubai's skyline glittered outside the glass-walled boardroom, a testament to ambition and audacity, much like the deal I was about to close. My urban innovation firm, Apex Ventures, had spent months crafting a proposal to transform a barren stretch of desert into a sustainable city hub. $3 billion, 0 cents on the line, the kind of project that could cement my name among the world's elite developers. The room buzzed with tension as I presented renderings of solar-powered towers and green public spaces to a panel of Emirati investors. My voice was steady, my slides flawless. Then my phone vibrated, a soft hum against the polished table. I ignored it. Rule 1 in this game, never break focus. But it buzzed again, insistent, like a warning shot. I glanced at the screen. Sophie Bennett, my childhood friend from Westbridge, New York, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My gut twisted. Sophie wouldn't call unless the sky was falling. "Excuse me," I said, forcing a smile to the investors. A brief pause. I stepped into the hallway, the air-conditioned chill biting through my tailored suit. "Sophie, this better be life or death." Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Ethan, it's your dad. James passed last night." The world tilted. My father, James Caldwell, the man who'd built Caldwell Enterprises from a single Westbridge apartment complex into a real estate empire worth billions, was gone. The man I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, not since our blowout fight that sent me storming halfway across the globe. I leaned against the wall, the glass cold against my palm, and tried to process the words. Dead. Just like that. Pancreatic cancer, Sophie said, had eaten him alive in months. He'd hidden it from everyone, especially me. I hadn't even known he was sick. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," Sophie said. "I know things were complicated, but you need to come home." Home. Westbridge, New York. A postcard-perfect town of tree-lined streets and historic brick buildings. The kind of place where everyone knows your name and your secrets. I hadn't set foot there since I was 27, when I'd packed a bag and boarded a flight to Dubai, vowing to prove I could outbuild my father on my own terms. Now, at 32, I was a CEO with awards lining my office walls, my sustainable projects featured in Forbes and Architectural Digest. But none of that erased the ache of our last words, the way he'd chosen his new wife, Victoria Langston, and her vision of luxury condos over the community-focused development we'd dreamed of together. He'd called me idealistic, immature. I'd called him a sellout. And then I was gone. "I'll be there," I told Sophie, my voice hollow. "Tomorrow." I hung up and stared at the Dubai skyline, its towers stabbing the sky like accusations. I should have called him, should have tried harder to bridge the gap. But Victoria had made sure that gap became a canyon, intercepting my calls, feeding me lies that he didn't want to hear from me. And I'd believed her, let pride and hurt keep me away. Now it was too late. The investors were waiting, their eyes sharp with curiosity when I returned. I finished the pitch, landed the deal, and shook hands with men who'd just bet billions on my vision. But as I left the room, my mind was already 7,000 miles away, in a town I'd sworn never to see again. The flight to New York was a blur of turbulence and regret. I landed at JFK under a slate-gray sky, the kind of dreary March day that makes you feel like the world's mourning with you. A rental car took me north to Westbridge, 2 hours up the Hudson, where the rolling hills and clapboard houses felt both familiar and foreign. My father's mansion, our mansion, sat at the edge of town, a sprawling Victorian with gabled roofs and wraparound porches. Growing up, it had been warm, lived in, filled with my dad's love for dark wood and leather-bound books. My mother's rose garden out back, where we'd scattered her ashes when I was 9, had been his sanctuary. But as I pulled into the driveway, I barely recognized it. Victoria had gutted the place. The classic facade was now punctuated with garish gold trim, the porch cluttered with modern sculptures that looked like they'd been plucked from a Miami art gallery. Her silver Bentley gleamed next to two other luxury cars, a stark contrast to my dad's old Ford pickup, which was nowhere in sight. I gripped the steering wheel, anger simmering. She'd erased him, just like she'd tried to erase me. I stepped out, my suitcase heavy in my hand, and took a breath. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, a scent that yanked me back to childhood, shooting hoops with Dad in the driveway, sketching building plans on the porch swing. But those memories felt like they belonged to someone else. I was Ethan Caldwell now, not the kid who'd worshipped his father. I was here to bury him, to face whatever mess he'd left behind, and to get out. Before I could reach the doorbell, the front door swung open. Chloe Langston, my stepsister, stood there, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, her face a mask of practiced grief. At 30, she looked every bit Victoria's daughter, polished, poised, with eyes that didn't quite meet mine. "Ethan," she said, her tone flat, "we didn't think you'd show." "Hell was my father," I replied, keeping my voice even. "I'm here." She stepped aside, and I crossed the threshold into a house that no longer felt like home. The foyer was a shrine to Victoria's taste. Marble floors, a chandelier dripping with crystals, abstract art that screamed money but no soul. Gone were Dad's antique maps, his collection of local history books. It was like he'd never lived here. "Mother's in the parlor with Mason and some guests," Chloe said, not offering to take my bag. She led the way, her heels clicking on the floor, and I followed, feeling like an intruder in my own past. The parlor was worse. White leather furniture, glass tables, a bar cart stocked with top-shelf liquor. Victoria sat at the center of it all, perched on a sofa like a queen holding court. A handful of Westbridge locals, people I vaguely recognized from my childhood, hovered around her, offering condolences. My stepbrother Mason lounged in an armchair, scrolling on his phone, his dark hair slicked back, his suit probably costing more than most people's rent. When Victoria saw me, her perfectly made-up face froze, just for a second, before melting into a performance of sorrow. "Sin," she said, rising to air-kiss my cheek, her perfume sharp and expensive. "What a surprise. We tried to reach you, of course, but your number must have changed." It hadn't. I'd checked my call logs on the plane. Her number hadn't appeared once in 5 years. But I played along, the way you do when you know the game's rigged. "I'm sorry for your loss," I said, the words formal, mechanical. "When's the funeral?" I asked, cutting through her theatrics. "Tomorrow at 3, Mason interjected, not looking up from his phone. "We've handled everything." The message was clear. "You're not needed here." Victoria's smile tightened. "Your old room's storage now, Ethan, but we've prepared the guest suite. I'm sure you'll be comfortable." I nodded, itching to escape the room's suffocating tension. "I'll settle in." As I turned to leave, Victoria's voice stopped me, sweet with an undercurrent of venom. "Oh, Ethan, the estate attorney Harold Grayson will be here tomorrow morning for the will reading. Family only, you understand." The words landed like a slap. Family only. As if I, James Caldwell's only son, didn't qualify. I met her gaze, her blue eyes glittering with challenge, and said nothing. I didn't need to. She'd underestimated me before, and it had cost her. This time, I'd make sure it did. Upstairs, the guest suite was as impersonal as a 5-star hotel. Beige walls, generic art, a bed that looked like it had never been slept in. No trace of my childhood, no hint of the boy who'd grown up in this house. I dropped my suitcase and sank onto the bed, my head pounding. 5 years. That's how long I'd been gone, proving my empire in Dubai, proving I didn't need my father's approval. But the truth gnawed at me. I'd wanted it anyway. Every award, every headline, Every billion-dollar deal had been a silent shout across the ocean, begging him to see me. And now he never would. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Meet me at the old oak tree, 8 p.m. Need to talk. The oak tree. Our childhood spot, where we'd carved our initials at 12, plotting our escape from small-town life. Sophie had stayed, running her family's bookstore, while I'd chased the horizon. I typed a quick reply, "See you there," and started unpacking, my mind racing. Sophie's call hadn't just been about Dad's death. There was something else, something she hadn't said over the phone. As I hung my suits in the closet, voices drifted from the hallway, Victoria and Mason, their tones low but sharp. I cracked the door, catching fragments. "Harold's got the will locked down," Victoria was saying. "Once it's read, we can push the Riverside sale to Voss." "What about Ethan?" Mason asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Think he'll make trouble?" Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "What can he do? He walked away. James left everything to us. Ethan's nothing but a ghost here." My hands clenched into fists, nails biting into my palms. Nothing but a ghost. I'd heard enough. I shut the door, my pulse hammering. Victoria thought she'd won, thought she could erase me from my father's legacy. But she didn't know what I did. Not yet. At 8, I slipped out the back door, avoiding the mansion's security cameras Victoria had no doubt installed. The air was crisp, the sky bruised with clouds. The old oak tree stood at the edge of the property, its gnarled branches a silhouette against the dusk. Sophie was already there, leaning against the trunk, her auburn hair tucked under a knit cap. She looked older than I remembered, but her green eyes still held that spark of defiance I'd loved as a kid. "You look like hell," she said, handing me a thermos of coffee. "Feel like it, too." I took a sip, the warmth grounding me. "What's going on, Soph? You didn't call me back to Westbridge just to break the news?" She glanced around, like she was checking for eavesdroppers, then lowered her voice. "Victoria's been moving fast. Since your dad got sick, she's been meeting with Gregory Voss, you know, that sleaze developer who builds overpriced condos. They're planning to sell the Riverside project, turn it into some elite playground. Luxury towers, private clubs, the works. It'll gut Westbridge's middle class, drive up housing costs. Your dad would have hated it. The Riverside project, the one Dad and I had spent years designing. A mixed-use development with affordable housing, local shops, a community center. It was supposed to be his legacy, our legacy. The fight over its direction, my push for inclusivity versus Victoria's obsession with profit, had been the final straw between me and Dad. Hearing she was dismantling it felt like a knife in the chest. "How do you know this?" I asked. "I've got ears in this town," Sophie said with a wry smile. "Plus, Evelyn Carter at Caldwell Enterprises. She's been keeping tabs on Victoria's moves." "Ethan, it's bad. Victoria's acting like she already owns everything, and she's made it clear you're not welcome at the will reading." She said that to my face," I muttered. "Family only." Sophie's eyes narrowed. "She's counting on you being too proud to fight. But I know you, Ethan. You're not here to roll over." I looked at her, the girl who'd once dared me to climb this very tree in a thunderstorm, and felt a spark of the old fire. "I'm not. But I need to know what I'm walking into. What else has she done?" Sophie hesitated, then pulled a small notebook from her jacket. "Your dad, he asked about you, all the time. Kept every article about your Dubai projects in a scrapbook in his office. Victoria told everyone he disowned you, but it's a lie. She intercepted your calls, your emails, made sure you thought he didn't care." The words hit harder than I expected. I'd spent years believing he'd written me off, that my success meant nothing to him. Knowing he'd been proud, that he'd wanted to reach me, cracked something open inside. Grief, yes, but also rage. Victoria hadn't just stolen my father's legacy. She'd stolen our chance to reconcile. "There's more," Sophie said, her voice barely audible. "Evelyn found something in your dad's office before Victoria cleared it out. A letter. It's addressed to you." She handed me the notebook, and I flipped it open. Tucked inside was an envelope, my name scrawled in my father's unmistakable handwriting. My heart thudded as I tore it open, the paper trembling in my hands. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I've made mistakes, son, but letting Victoria come between us was the worst. She doesn't know about this letter or the plans I've made. There's a safe deposit box at First National, box 472. The key's hidden behind the Monte Cristo painting in my office. Whatever you think of me, know I never stopped believing in you. I've always had a plan. Finish what we started." Yeah. I read it twice, then a third time, each word burning into me. A safe deposit box, a key, a plan. My father, the man who'd taught me to read blueprints before I could ride a bike, had left me something Victoria didn't know about. I looked at Sophie, who was watching me closely. "You think it's real?" I asked. "I think your dad was smarter than anyone gave him credit for," she said. "And I think Victoria's about to regret underestimating you." I didn't sleep that night. The guest suite's silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the old house. I lay awake, the letter clutched in my hand, replaying every moment of my last fight with Dad. The way he'd looked at me, disappointed but not defeated, like he knew I'd come back someday. I thought about Victoria's smug dismissal, Mason's entitled sneer, Chloe's guarded silence. They thought they'd won. They thought I was just a prodigal son with no claim to my father's empire. They were wrong. At dawn, I dressed in a charcoal suit, the one I'd worn to close the Dubai deal, and drove to First National Bank. The town was waking up, shopkeepers sweeping sidewalks, the diner on Main Street already packed. Westbridge hadn't changed much in 5 years, but I had. I wasn't the angry kid who'd left. I was a man who'd built cities, who knew how to play the game and win. The bank manager, an older woman who'd known my father, led me to the safe deposit boxes without question. Box 472 opened with a soft click, revealing a leather folder, a USB drive, and a small key taped to a note. "Office vault. You'll know what to do." I took the contents to a coffee shop on the edge of town, a place Victoria's crowd wouldn't be caught dead in. The folder held property deeds, dozens of them, covering the Riverside Project, downtown skyscrapers, luxury estates along the Hudson, all in my name, signed over 3 years ago. Billions in assets, legally mine. The USB drive was heavier, though. I plugged it into my laptop, my hands unsteady, and clicked the single video file. My father appeared on screen, gaunt and pale, his blue eyes still sharp. "Ethan," he said, his voice steady despite his frailty, "if you're watching this, you found the letter. I'm sorry for everything. I let Victoria drive a wedge between us, but I never stopped watching you. Your work in Dubai, you've made me prouder than I can say. I've transferred 70% of Caldwell Enterprises' assets to you. Riverside, the downtown portfolio, the estates. Victoria doesn't know. She thinks she's inheriting it all, but I've set up Harrison Legacy Holdings to protect what matters. You're the sole owner. She'll fight you, son, but you're stronger than she is. Finish the Riverside project the way we planned. For Westbridge, for us." The video ended and I sat there, tears burning my eyes. He'd planned it all, even as he was dying. He'd outmaneuvered Victoria, protected his legacy, and trusted me to carry it forward. I wiped my face, my resolve hardening. The will reading was in 2 hours. Victoria thought she'd humiliate me, cast me out like some unwanted heir. But I had the deeds, the video, the truth, and I was done playing nice. Back at the mansion, I found Evelyn Carter waiting in the driveway, her silver hair pulled back, her expression grim. She'd been my father's assistant for 20 years, a woman who knew every secret in Caldwell Enterprises. She handed me a second USB drive, her voice low. "Your father made me promise to give this to you in person. It's walkthroughs of the properties he transferred. He wanted you to know why they matter." "Evelyn," I said, pocketing the drive, "what's Victoria planning?" She glanced at the mansion, where Victoria's silhouette moved behind a window. "She's been meeting with Gregory Voss for months. They've got a deal to sell Riverside to his firm for $2 billion. Luxury condos, private marina, gated community. She's already spent the advance, Ethan, and she's got Mason forging documents to make it look like your dad approved the sale before he died." My blood ran cold. Forgery. It was bold, even for Victoria. "Can you get me proof?" "I'm working on it," she said. "But be careful. She knows you're here, and she's not happy. Mason's been erratic. Watch your back." I thanked her and headed inside, my mind spinning. The will reading was at Harold Grayson's office, a sleek high-rise my father had owned, though I now knew it was mine, transferred to me 18 months ago. Victoria's plan was clear: lock me out, sell off Dad's legacy, and pocket the profits. But she didn't know about the deeds, the video, or the key in my pocket. She didn't know I was coming for her. As I passed the library, a glint caught my eye. The first edition, The Count of Monte Cristo, still on its shelf despite Victoria's redecorating. I pulled it down, my fingers brushing the worn leather. A memory flashed. Dad handing it to me on my 16th birthday, his inscription inside: "Patience and planning always win." I opened it, half expecting another letter, but found nothing. Still, it felt like a sign. Dad had loved this book. Its story of betrayal and revenge. He'd known exactly what he was doing when he hid that letter inside. I slipped the book back and headed to my room, the key to the office vault burning a hole in my pocket. The vault was in Dad's old office, now locked and stripped bare by Victoria. But I knew this house better than she did. There was a loose floorboard in the hallway, a spot where Dad had always kept a spare key. Some things never change. I knelt, pried up the board, and found it. A small brass key, untouched. My heart raced as I stood, the mansion silent around me. The office was at the end of the hall, its doors sealed with a new lock. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting Victoria or Mason to appear, but the house was still. I inserted the key, the lock clicking open with a soft thud. Inside, the room was a ghost of itself. No books, no maps, no trace of my father's presence. But the Monte Cristo painting still hung on the wall, a moody seascape he'd bought after Mom died. I lifted it down, my hands shaking, and found the vault key taped to the back, just as he'd promised. Below it was a note in his handwriting. "You're ready, Ethan. Take it back." I pocketed the key and replaced the painting, my mind racing. The vault was behind a false panel in the bookcase. I'd seen Dad open it once, years ago, when he'd shown me the original Riverside plans. I pressed the panel and it sprang open, revealing a small steel door. The key fit perfectly. Inside was another folder, thicker than the one from the bank, and a stack of letters addressed to me, each dated over the past 3 years. I didn't have time to read them now, but I skimmed the top one. "I'm sorry, son. I should have fought harder for you. She lied to us both." My throat tightened. Victoria had spent years poisoning our relationship, and Dad had known. He'd been trying to reach me, to protect me, even as she tightened her grip. I grabbed the folder and letters, locked the vault, and slipped out of the office, my heart pounding. The will reading was an hour away. I had everything I needed to bury Victoria's plans, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she had something up her sleeve, too. As I drove to Harold Grayson's office, Sophie's warning echoed in my head. Victoria's rallying Westbridge's elite. I knew what that meant. The town's old money, the country club crowd, the people who'd always resented my father's rise from nothing. They'd back Victoria's vision of a glitzy, exclusive Westbridge, even if it meant pricing out the families who'd lived here for generations. I'd have to fight not just her, but an entire social machine she'd spent years building. The high-rise loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the gray sky. My father's building. My building. I parked, straightened my tie, and walked inside, the folder of deeds and USB drives heavy in my briefcase. The receptionist, a young woman with nervous eyes, stammered when I gave my name. "Mr. Caldwell, let me check with Mr. Grayson." She scurried off, returning with Harold himself, his suit impeccable, but his face pale. He'd been Dad's attorney for 2 decades, a man I'd once trusted. Now he looked at me like I was a bomb about to go off. "Ethan," he said, not offering his hand, "this is unexpected. Today's meeting is a private family matter." "I'm family," I said, my voice steel. "James Caldwell's only son. I'm here for the will reading." Harold's jaw tightened. Victoria felt, given your absence, it might be better to arrange a separate discussion. "I'm joining this one," I said, stepping past him toward the conference room. I could hear voices inside, Victoria's polished cadence, Mason's low grumble. Harold hurried after me, his polished shoes squeaking on the marble floor. "Even pleased." I pushed open the door and the room fell silent. Victoria sat at the head of the table dressed in black silk, her ash-blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. Mason slouched beside her, his eyes narrowing at the sight of me. Chloe sat on her other side, her expression unreadable. A few others were present. Dad's banker, a local councilman who'd always kissed up to Victoria, and a man I recognized as Gregory Voss's attorney, his presence a red flag. This wasn't just a will reading, it was a power play. "Ethan," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false warmth, "I wasn't expecting you." "I came to hear my father's will," I said, taking a seat across from her. I set my briefcase on the table, the click of its latches loud in the silence. Harold hovered at the door, sweating. "Victoria, I wasn't aware Ethan would be joining us." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes turned to ice. "This meeting is for heirs only. Ethan removed himself from this family years ago." I leaned back, my heart steady despite the adrenaline. "Funny you say that, Victoria, because I've got something that says otherwise." I opened the briefcase, pulled out the folder of deeds, and slid them across the table. The room seemed to hold its breath as Victoria's gaze dropped to the documents. Her hand twitched, but she didn't reach for them, not yet. Harold cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "Shall we begin?" "Go ahead," I said, my eyes locked on Victoria's. "Let's see what my father had to say." As Harold started reading the legal preamble, I studied the faces around me. Victoria's composure was a mask, but I could see the cracks, her fingers tightening on her pen, her lips pressing into a thin line. Mason shifted, his boredom giving way to unease. Chloe stared at the table, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. The councilman avoided my gaze, and Voss's attorney scribbled notes, his presence a reminder that this fight was bigger than the room. I didn't know what the will would say, not exactly, but I had the deeds, the video, the letters. I had my father's plan. And as Harold's voice droned on, I felt something I hadn't in years. Certainty. Victoria thought she'd won the moment my father died. She thought she could erase me, sell his legacy, and walk away richer than God. But she'd forgotten who she was dealing with. I was James Caldwell's son, and I was just getting started.